They called her a national treasure. But behind the accolades and sold-out concerts, there was a truth no one wanted to admit. Kate Ceberano, one of Australia's most versatile and enduring voices, was never truly embraced by her own industry. Why? Because she didn't fit the mold. Not musically, not culturally, and certainly not commercially. For over 4 decades, she glided across genres with astonishing grace: jazz, soul, pop, funk, rock, even gospel. But instead of celebration, this chameleon-like artistry often left her boxed out of Australia's tightly defined pop landscape. Despite a voice that could rival the greats, despite ARIA wins and international recognition, Kate found herself repeatedly passed over for less talented but more marketable faces. There were awards she should have been nominated for, but wasn't. Major national events where her name was absent. Radio charts that seemed to intentionally overlook her work. "It's as if I've always had to fight twice as hard just to be seen," she once said. And that battle, silent, exhausting, and painfully lonely, never truly ended. But perhaps the real question isn't why they ignored her. The question is, what does it say about the Australian music industry when one of its most groundbreaking artists had to wage a private war just to belong? This is not just the story of a talented woman, it's the story of a system that couldn't handle her brilliance. And now, after decades of whispers, regrets, and untold truths, it's time to uncover what really happened behind the scenes. The missed opportunities, the coded rejections, the hurt. This is the story of Kate Ceberano, the diva who never stopped singing, even when the stage tried to vanish beneath her feet. Kate Ceberano emerged in the 1980s, a decade of excess, neon glitz, and a rigid pop formula dominated by radio-friendly icons. It was an era when Australia's music industry sought polished packages: blonde pop princesses, guitar-slinging rock boys, or brooding indie rebels. But Kate didn't fit into any of those boxes. She was soulful, raw, unpredictable, and perhaps most inconvenient of all, unapologetically herself. Born in Melbourne in 1966 to a father of Filipino descent and a mother from Hawaii with African-American roots, Kate stood out from the moment she stepped into the public eye. Not just because of her unmistakable contralto voice, but because she looked different, sang different, and refused to be labeled. While others chased chart trends, she chased expression. While most artists were busy defining their sound, Kate was already redefining what sound meant. Her first break came as the lead singer of the funk soul band I'm Talking, a group that was as bold in style as it was genre-bending in sound. Their 1986 album Bear Witness became a cult classic, spawning hits and giving Kate her first taste of fame. But even in the glow of their ARIA success, she sensed something peculiar. The industry praised her, but with caution, like they didn't quite know what to do with her. The Australian media adored pigeonholes, and Kate Ceberano was allergic to them. One moment she was covering jazz standards in smoky venues, the next she was belting power ballads on TV, and by the early 90s, she was releasing a gospel-inspired album. Her trajectory defied commercial predictability. It should have been celebrated. But instead, her versatility became the excuse used to marginalize her. There was always a quiet undertone in how she was spoken about: eccentric, niche, genre-confused. These weren't compliments. They were soft insults, veiled in music industry code. And while her male counterparts, Paul Kelly, Nick Cave, were lauded for experimentation, Kate was often framed as inconsistent. Worse, her identity became another invisible wall. In a time when most mainstream Australian stars were white, Kate's multicultural background made her both fascinating and other. She was often cast as exotic, mysterious, descriptors that, while flattering on the surface, became tools of exclusion. As one journalist later reflected, she was never given the privilege of being ordinary. Even when she had a #1 album, Brave in 1989, it wasn't followed by a rush of industry offers or endorsements. Instead, she found herself fielding strange backhanded praise. "You're so good live. Why don't we hear you more on radio? You have a beautiful voice. It's just hard to place you." The implication was always the same. Her artistry was admirable, but not profitable. And yet, Kate didn't retreat. She doubled down. She toured relentlessly, released more albums, starred in musicals, and continued to evolve. But that quiet fight for recognition never left her shadow. It lingered backstage at the awards shows where she wasn't invited. It echoed in the silence of mainstream stations that didn't play her songs. It pressed on her in every interview where the unspoken question was always, why are you still here? Because she had to be. Because no one else was going to carry her story. In 1983, at just 17 years old, Kate Ceberano was already making waves in the Melbourne underground scene. Her voice, a sultry, smoky contralto that sounded more like New York than St. Kilda, made her a standout in every room she walked into. But it wasn't until she joined the band I'm Talking in 1984 that her ascent truly began. With influences rooted in funk, soul, and dance, I'm Talking was everything the Australian charts weren't at the time. Edgy, urban, unapologetically Black-inspired. Kate's image was bold, high cheekbones, wild curls, commanding stage presence, and her voice soared over synths and slap bass like it had lived 10 lives. By 1986, their debut album Bear Witness was a hit, and Kate was being touted as a future icon. She had charisma, originality, and raw power. But just as quickly as I'm Talking had risen, internal tensions fractured the group. Creative clashes, management missteps, and the exhausting pressure of commercial success led to their quiet disbandment in 1987. For most young stars, this might have been the end. For Kate, it was only the beginning. She went solo with Kate Ceberano and her septet, returning to her jazz roots, a bold move in an era obsessed with synth pop. The industry didn't quite know what to make of it, but critics were impressed. Still, it was Brave, 1989, that cemented her as a force. With hits like Bedroom Eyes, she finally had mainstream radio in her grasp. The song became one of the biggest-selling singles of the year. For a moment, it seemed like she had crossed over. Commercial success, pop stardom, ARIA nominations, international attention. But then, something shifted. The follow-up support from the industry was hesitant, almost reluctant. She didn't get the same marketing machine others did. Her genre hopping again became a narrative problem. In 1990, instead of doubling down on pop, Kate defied expectations by releasing Like Now, a jazz album. Beautiful, yes. Bold, certainly. But in the eyes of commercial radio, it was a retreat. Behind the scenes, executives began whispering that she was too artistic, too unpredictable. Offers slowed, invitations dried up. Still, she refused to conform. She starred in the musical Jesus Christ Superstar in 1992, earning rave reviews for her role as Mary Magdalene. Her duet with John Farnham, Everything's All Right, climbed the charts. But even that wasn't enough to fully sway the gatekeepers. She could be brilliant in theater, beloved in jazz, powerful in pop, but rarely was she allowed to be all at once. Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, she continued releasing albums. Pash, 1997, was a modest hit, and the title track became a radio staple. But none of her work ever received the industry infrastructure it deserved. While others with less depth and shorter careers rode waves of label-backed promotions and award recognition, Kate was still being treated like a side act. And it wasn't just the labels. The media had a way of diminishing her too, often portraying her as quirky, bohemian, unusual. These weren't just harmless adjectives. They were coded ways of saying, she doesn't fit. Still, Kate pushed on. She collaborated with symphonies, experimented with electronic sounds, recorded live jazz albums, and wrote children's music. She reinvented herself again and again, not because she needed to, but because that's who she was, an artist in constant evolution. But reinvention came at a price. With every new version of herself, she had to re-justify her existence to an industry that kept asking, why don't you just pick a lane? The truth was, she didn't want a lane. She wanted the whole road, and she was willing to walk it alone. For all her undeniable talent, Kate Ceberano was never the music industry's darling. She was its outlier, the name you whispered with admiration but didn't quite elevate. And as the years went on, the pattern became painfully clear. No matter how much she gave, it was never enough to be fully let in. In private interviews, Kate spoke candidly about feeling like an outsider in her own country's music scene. Sometimes, she said softly, it felt like I was singing to prove I deserved to be here, not just as a woman or a person of color, but as an artist. Her voice didn't shake, but you could hear the weight in her words. There were stories few people knew. One major festival rescinded her headline spot at the last minute, citing marketing concerns. A prominent award ceremony passed her over for nominations even when her albums met every criterion. Platinum sales, critical acclaim, radio play. When asked why, the response was chillingly vague. We're focusing on newer talent this year. That year, artists with less output and far smaller followings were celebrated. Kate was ignored. Even in industry panels and retrospectives about Australian music legends, her name was often missing. It was as if her decades of work were seen as adjacent, not part of the core canon. One producer privately told her, "You're too good. People don't know where to place that." As if excellence itself was an inconvenience. The press, too, had its share of erasure. Reviews praised her vocals, but always with an asterisk: underrated, overlooked, a cult figure. One critic even referred to her as a genre refugee, trying to find a home in a country that never built her one. No one dared to say the truth. She was being systemically minimized. Behind the scenes, the emotional toll was immense. Kate admitted to bouts of depression, tired of questioning whether she was chasing something that would never arrive: true recognition. Not applause, not ticket sales, but respect. She once said, "I kept waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, but no one ever did. And still, she kept showing up." Albums like 9 Lime Avenue, 2007, and My Life is a Symphony, 2023, showed an artist who had evolved into full emotional maturity, deep, nuanced, and honest. But even as she soared creatively, the silence from gatekeepers remained. She was rarely called to judge on music reality shows. She was almost never featured in national retrospectives. Her name became one that only real music lovers mentioned. Then came the public reaction, raw, impassioned, and heartbreaking. Fans flooded forums and social media threads with memories. Kate was the soundtrack to my youth. Why isn't she a national icon? We let the industry ignore her for too long. A groundswell of overdue appreciation began, not from executives, but from people. Ordinary people. People who had grown up with her voice but never realized how much she had been denied. Even fellow artists spoke up. Musicians who had shared the stage with her expressed disbelief that she wasn't more celebrated. If Kate Ceberano had been American, one singer said, she'd have Grammys. Here, she has to fight for what should have been handed to her long ago. But perhaps the darkest truth is this: the industry didn't reject her because she lacked something. It rejected her because she had too much range, too much fire, too much soul. And in a system that thrives on predictability, Kate Ceberano was a storm they never knew how to harness. At Aussie Uncovered, we believe that Kate Ceberano's story is more than just a footnote in Australian music history. It's a mirror held up to the very system that shaped and in many ways silenced her. She wasn't forgotten. She was intentionally sidelined, boxed away from the spotlight because her light was too difficult to package. From our perspective, Kate Ceberano is not just a versatile artist. She is one of the most important female voices this country has ever produced. Her range, emotionally and musically, is staggering. Her career spans funk, soul, jazz, pop, gospel, and orchestral collaborations. Yet the industry continued to treat her as if she were a puzzle they didn't have time to solve. It is deeply troubling that someone who broke barriers, redefined genres, and consistently delivered high-caliber performances has had to work so tirelessly for basic acknowledgement, while far less accomplished artists have coasted on image and industry favors. Kate's journey isn't just a story of talent. It's a story of resilience against cultural and institutional indifference. We also have to speak plainly about the coded bias that runs through this entire narrative. Kate's multicultural heritage, her refusal to conform to the Aussie girl next door stereotype, and her genre-defying music were not celebrated. They were quietly used as reasons to keep her at the margins. Let's not pretend that race, gender, and nonconformity didn't play a role in the industry's discomfort. It's heartbreaking to consider what she could have achieved had she been given the same resources, recognition, and platform as her white, male counterparts. And yet, she never stopped creating, never stopped pushing, never stopped singing. That alone makes her a legend. If there is a lesson in Kate's story, it's this: true greatness doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it comes with silence. And in that silence, an artist either gives up or grows louder. Kate Ceberano chose the latter. We urge you not just to revisit her work, but to reframe how you see her. Not as a cult favorite or underrated gem, but as a cornerstone of Australian music who was never given her rightful place. Maybe now, decades later, It's time we give it to her. What do you think? Was Kate Ceberano a victim of an industry too rigid to embrace difference? Or is she proof that true artistry survives without permission? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Because maybe, just maybe, this is how the recognition finally begins. Some artists follow the road, others carve it. Kate Ceberano was the latter, a voice that never settled, a spirit that never shrank. She didn't ask for permission to change, to blend jazz into pop, soul into gospel, or honesty into every lyric. She simply did. And for that, she paid the price of being misunderstood, underpromoted, and, for too long, underrated. But those who grew up with her songs remember the late-night radio spins, the cassette tape rewinds, the haunting lines from Brave, the elegance of Like Now, the fire of Pash, the wisdom in her symphonic work. Her music didn't just entertain, it healed, it defied. It stood quietly in defiance of what Australia expected its stars to be. Kate's legacy is not just in the albums or the accolades, it's in the persistence, in the way she showed up year after year, album after album, even when the cameras looked elsewhere. In the way she taught us that belonging isn't always given. Sometimes it has to be earned with bruises and silence. And sometimes, even then, it never comes. But her voice, it never left. And now, in the calm of reflection, we see her for what she truly is. Not just a singer, not just a genre-defier, but a survivor of an industry that never fully deserved her. Some stories are never told, but now you know. And maybe the next time a song of hers plays unexpectedly, you'll pause and hear it not just as a melody, but as a reminder that Kate Ceberano was always here. We just didn't listen close enough.